We'll double check and we will triple check. One of the more interesting Israelis I met was the Doubting Thomas. He's the guy, he's a colonel. All information that went to the director of military intelligence came through him, all assessments. He sat down and picked them apart. And basically, if you made an assertion, he said, how do you know this? If you said X, he said, why isn't it Y? And you had to answer him. You had to come back and explain this, and only then did the policy get, or the analysis get to the director of military intelligence, who is the head of national assessments in Israel. He then takes it to the prime minister. So imagine that, being the head of state, getting quality intelligence from your intelligence community that's been double-checked, triple-checked, questioned, so there's no room for error. But an interesting thing happened in the aftermath of the Gulf War. Some personalities took over. One in particular I write about in the book, Amos Gilad. Then a brigadier general, I think he left as a major general. But Amos Gilad brought back into fruition the notion of concepcia. You see, he conceived the notion of a nexus combining Iran with Hezbollah with Hamas. And he said, Israel is at threat. This whole thing is lumped together, and we have to deal with it all. And the head that has to be cut off, if we're going to succeed, is Iran. Iran is the threat. Iran is the problem. Iran must be dealt with. And he started slanting the intelligence assessments that were being presented to the director of military intelligence, this time on what I'll call faith-based analysis. His gut feeling, his belief, but not the facts. This isn't sound, factually based analysis. This is a deviation. And unfortunately, the politicians bought off on it. And again, because we have yet today to be able to separate in the American policy formulation that involves Israel, separate Israeli interests from American interests, the Israeli government has been very successful in using the pro-Israeli lobby to make sure that the Israeli concerns, the Israeli point of view, becomes the American point of view. And that's what's happening here. But yes, Israel has agents operating inside Iran. They better have agents operating inside Iran. I wish we had more agents operating inside Iran so we knew more was going on. Can you blame Israel because they care about nuclear weapons for trying to get close to the International Atomic Energy Agency? We do it. Well, why is the world surprised that Israel is going to do it? When you have inspectors that go into a nation that you have deemed hostile, you want to know what they know. You also want to help guide them. Israel did this in Iraq, and I have to say it was very honorable what they did. They didn't go in to corrupt the inspection process. They went in to improve, to enhance the inspection process. But with Iraq, it was fact-based analysis. That's why at the end of the day, the Israeli government was willing to accept that Iran had been virtually disarmed, that almost all the WMD had been accounted for. In 1998, that was the assessment. Thanks to Amos Gilad, by 2003, Iraq's weapons of mass destruction had been reborn. And he didn't have to explain how they had been reborn. It was concepcia. It was a gut feeling. They were there because Saddam's bad. The same thing's happening with Iran today, because all of this intelligence work that's being done has uncovered a nuclear enrichment program, not a nuclear weapons program. But the Israelis have already concluded, thanks to Amos Gilad and his concepcia, that a nuclear weapons program exists. Therefore, if you're not finding evidence of it, it means you're not looking in the right places. So then you begin to speculate. How many people here remember underground facilities in Iraq? Saddam's tunnels, everything buried. Well, there weren't any, were there? Well, guess what? The Israelis talk about tunnels in Iran, and there are tunnels in Iran. The Iranians have been working with the North Koreans for the last couple of decades to perfect deep tunneling techniques, and they are boring in the ground. You saw all those little Hezbollah tunnels in South Lebanon that were so effective against the Israelis? They were dug by the Iranians with North Korean assistance. That comes from the Iranians themselves. And they're doing the same thing in Iran today. And the Israelis are detecting this deep tunneling activity. And they're sending elements in to do reconnaissance on that. But they're not finding any evidence of nuclear-related activity because there isn't any going on. But again, thanks to concepcia, Gilad, and the way the Israelis now do their assessments, they immediately equate deep tunneling and a nuclear enrichment program to mean that there is a secret underground nuclear weapons program. Faith-based analysis has trumped fact-based analysis, and because of the pressure put on American policymakers by the Israeli lobby, our own government has now embraced this point of view. And this is very dangerous, ladies and gentlemen, because if we accept at face value without question the notion of a nuclear weapons program in Iran, that means the debate's over. It's over, because if Iran has a nuclear weapons program that operates in violation of international law, it's very easy for American policymakers to talk about the imperative to confront this. And if you can't confront it successfully diplomatically, that leaves only the military option on the table. And right now, that's the direction we're heading, because the debate's over, apparently, about whether or not Iran has a nuclear weapons program, even though the IAEA has come out and said there's no evidence whatsoever to sustain the Bush administration's allegations that such a weapons program exists. Note, I didn't say that the IAEA said there is no such weapons program. They can't prove that. But note, the Bush administration has taken this and now changed course, like they did with Iraq. Saddam said, we don't have any weapons. The inspectors aren't finding any weapons. Keep looking. Why? Because the onus isn't on the inspectors to find the weapons. The onus is on Iraq to prove that none exist. But how can you prove a negative? The same thing is in play today with Iran. We have told the Iranians it is their responsibility to prove to the international community, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that there is no nuclear weapons program in Iran. How can you prove a negative? But that's not the point, because it's not about a nuclear weapons program. It's about regime change in the Bush administration using the perception of threat from a nuclear weapons program to achieve their ultimate objective of regional transformation, which is, again, a policy born more in Tel Aviv than Washington, D.C.
Okay. Digression. One of the things you and I used to talk about was when Scott was an inspector from 91 to 98, he got in a lot of trouble, an awful lot of trouble with his government, because he would take highly classified information to Israel to be analyzed first. You remember? Particularly some of the overhead stuff, U2 stuff. And that caused you a lot of investigations, a lot of problems in terms of just loyalty issues. But still, the fact is, you thought so highly of Israel. I remember you telling me years ago that they could understand what was going on from satellite photographs in 6 or 7 hours. If you gave it to the American system, we were dealing in a week, and you would get a bad analysis. No, that's just you had a lot of faith in their intelligence capability. So what the hell's going on there? Is it as simple as that? It's just simple as a few people at the top playing Ahmed Chalabi, or is it what happened? Why aren't they calling it the way, if you're right, they should?
Well, again, I think it comes down to, the Bush administration likes to talk a lot about the nexus between weapons of mass destruction and terrorism. I'll talk about the nexus between the neoconservatives in Washington, D.C. and the right wing of the Likud party in Israel. These elements, these political elements, have been working hand in glove for many, many years. And now that the neoconservatives in Washington, D.C.